I'm Jonathan Wilkinson, and I am Canada's Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
And I'm Stephen Guilbeault. I'm Canada's Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
One of you needs to say, and we're going to answer your question.
Oh.
That was you. I was waiting for you.
Do you want us to start over? And we're here to answer your questions on Canada's upcoming pollution cap. So, first question, what is a pollution cap? Well, it's a new mechanism that we're adding to our arsenal of measures to fight climate change in Canada. And basically what we're doing with that is putting a cap, literally, on the amount of pollution that the oil and gas sector can emit on any given year, and that cap will go down over time. So it's a way to make sure that regardless of what happens in the sector in terms of production, the pollution levels go down so that Canada can't make its contribution to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, not just in our country, but to contribute to the international efforts to fight climate change.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important in the context of the fight against climate change. Every sector needs to do its part. But it's also important in the context of the Canadian economy. The world is moving to a low-carbon future, and it is really important that our oil and gas sector decarbonize if they are going to be competitive in a future that is already happening right now. All right. Why do we need a cap on pollution? Well, as I was saying, I mean, climate change is real. No matter what some politicians will tell you, climate change is real. It's a science issue, not a partisan, or shouldn't be a partisan issue. We need to fight climate change, and Canada needs to do its part. And 30% of Canada's emissions come from the oil and gas sector. It is the largest single source of emissions, and it's the only one that keeps going up. But it's also, as I said before, extremely important for the future of the Canadian economy that we actually decarbonize the oil and gas sector. And I think many of the CEOs in the oil and gas sector would agree with that.
And it's also a way for us to ensure that while the federal government is investing in every sector of our economy to make sure that we decarbonize, that we reduce the level of pollution, whether it's electrifying our transportation sector, electrifying electricity production, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The oil and gas sector, as Jonathan said, also has to do its fair share. And as we're investing, this regulation will ensure that the companies themselves also invest in what is their future and the future of their workers and those regions in Canada that are still very dependent on oil and gas. Is a pollution cap a production cap? No, it is not. So the goal of what we're trying to do is not to put a cap on the production of oil and gas. And frankly, if we did that, while the rest of the world is still very dependent on fossil fuels, all we would do is move production somewhere else. And the planet and the fight against climate change would be no better off.
And there will be some, Premier Smith for one, who will tell you this is a cap on production. That's simply not true. It is a cap on emissions. We actually expect to see that production will grow for the next few years before it starts to decline everywhere around the world. Does industry want a pollution cap? Well, I think you will hear from some in industry that they prefer that there not be a cap on emissions. No industry likes to be held accountable for specific timelines, even if they are timelines to which they actually have signed up to in the past. We hear the same thing from other sectors, which is to say, oh, we have great ambitions about what we're going to do, but don't hold us accountable for those ambitions. What this says is the oil and gas sector needs to be held accountable for emissions reductions that are reasonable and are achievable in the same way that we are holding other sectors of the economy accountable. Again, climate change is real. You can't just say the words. You actually have to walk the walk.
And some people might say, we're unfairly targeting the oil and gas sector. Well, in fact, that's not true. We've put in place measures for the electricity sector. We're in the process of doing that. The transportation sector, by 2035, 100% of cars sold in Canada will have to be zero-emission vehicles, so either hydrogen or electric vehicles. So we are looking at the building sector. We're looking at every single sector of our economy to make sure that everyone does its fair share. So we're not asking the oil and gas sector to do more than others, but we are asking them to do their fair share. Why don't conservative politicians support a pollution cap? Where to start? Jonathan half-jokingly said earlier that it shouldn't be a partisan debate, but unfortunately, the reality of climate change is not recognized by the Conservative Party of Canada and by other Conservative politicians in our country in the face of billions of dollars of climate damages that are increasing year over year. The Insurance Bureau of Canada just came out with a report that said that in 2024, for the month of July and August, $7 billion in insured loss. It is the most expensive year on record, and it's not even the year yet, it's just 2 months. So I guess that's one reason why they don't want a pollution cap, because Conservatives don't believe in fighting, well, they don't believe in climate change, therefore they don't believe in fighting climate change.
I've sat across from Mr. Polyev for 9 years now. I'm honestly not sure if he actually even believes that climate change is real. Certainly if he does believe it's real, he certainly doesn't think it's very important. I have never heard from him a discussion about climate policy or why it's important for us to do this. At the end of the day, if you don't have a plan to fight climate change by actually reducing emissions across the economy, you have to question whether you really believe in climate change. Perfect. Only took 2 takes. I was going to say, 2 takes to say our names. So.